You're listening to Project Thought with Hannah Yeoh.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Hobart Airport. Local time approached 11 past 9 this morning. Please remain seated with the
I
seatbelt
studied
button.
4 years in Australia to get my law degree, and then I did my graduate certificate of legal practice so that I could practice law in Australia. And I really wanted to stay on and find a job as a lawyer in Australia. And also, I was in a relationship at that time. It was only natural for me to want to find a job after graduation so that I could stay on in Australia. The other consideration was if I earn Australian dollar, then I could finance myself, be independent, being the eldest in my family. I don't have to rely on my father to sustain me. And my father's savings then can go into paying for my siblings' university fee. So, in that sense, I really wanted to be financially independent and have some kind of control over my own life. The day I was informed that my PR application was rejected, I cried on my way home from the law firm to my rented room because I felt that's the end of a dream. Because I could not secure my PR, I had to give up my job as a lawyer too. That entire dream of working overseas came to an end. And on top of that, it also meant that I had to come home. I have to be apart from my boyfriend to have to work through a long distance relationship. So you can imagine how reluctant I was working in Malaysia, already unhappy about coming home, unhappy about being in a long distance relationship, unhappy about the fact that I was not earning enough of saving so that I could fly to Australia whenever I wanted to. I met Edward in school, 4 years my junior in Yeoh Club. He is this very, very tall boy. Even at a very young age, he's so tall. I'm not that tall, I'm short. When we were in university, Edward studied in Melbourne and I studied in Hobart. And when he was in Australia, he was part of the Overseas Christian Fellowship in Melbourne. I was also in Overseas Christian Fellowship. And so the Overseas Christian Fellowship believe in training and equipping young Christians not to stay back in Australia after graduation, but to return home and to serve your country. And so we had that understanding that we are called to be home in Malaysia. We should stop complaining, even though we are unhappy, and we should find ways to improve the situation and do something about it. And that's when Edward started talking about joining politics, doing something more than just complaining and talking. But like many young Malaysians, in my mind, coming home to Malaysia is not a plan to prosper me. I felt like there were better options overseas and I longed to be overseas. Having to reconcile all that unhappiness within me. And at lunchtime, you hear about corruption, you hear about, nobody's doing anything. Why don't we do something about this? The common ground for us when we met up for lunch back in Malaysia, almost on a daily basis, we were lamenting a lot about working life in KL and how that's so different from the time we had studying in Australia. I was also mourning not being granted PR in Australia. I was very concerned about my own personal life. And here is Edward talking about saving Malaysia. So it was a very intense lunchtime when I met Edward. I felt Edward enjoyed those lunches because he was influencing me to think like him, to do something positive with my unhappiness, almost like, Edward starting a revolution. For me, I just felt like here's someone I can complain to who can understand how unhappy I am about being home here. So I thought at that time, the least I could do is to support this young man who is so passionate about politics. I say, Edward, you join a political party, I'll join with you so that you don't have to go to meetings alone. And that's how I can support you, I can just teman you lah, just accompany you to those meetings. And I felt that was my way of playing my role as a Malaysian. I just want to just be there for him so that he can see his calling in politics realized. So that was how I got introduced to politics by Edward Ling.
In the next episode, Hannah tells us about meeting a man named Tony Poa and how through him she finally joins a political party. You've been listening to Project Thought with Hannah Yeoh.